We're here at Tampa General Hospital in Florida, one of the premier facilities in the nation for organ transplants, among other specialties. And joining us is Bill Ismer, who had a severe heart attack and actually died nearly 20 years ago. The fine staff here at TGH were able to save his life, and with the gift of a heart transplant, he's here with us today. Over 20 years ago, Bill Ismer lived a very active lifestyle. Daily activities included jogging on the beach, swimming in the ocean, and biking for miles.
I wasn't as great a shape as I thought I was, obviously.
One evening, out of nowhere, Bill began feeling numbness in his left arm and pain near his heart.
This first time, only time.
Oh, wow.
I recognized those symptoms to be an impending heart attack. Sure. So I called 911, and I remember the responding paramedic speaking to the doctor at the emergency room at Jupiter Medical Center. And he said, "No, we've got a heart attack in the making."
When the paramedics arrived, Bill's pain was worsening, so he was rushed to the closest medical center into triage.
So they drove me 1018, which is the lights and sirens on, to the hospital, Jupiter Medical Center. Whereupon I was speaking to, they were doing triage on me. I was speaking to a young lady, and I remember her hair was perfect, and she was speaking to me, triage, asking me what were the symptoms, what was happening. And at that moment, I felt a sharp pain.
While describing his pain to the nurse, Bill's heart abruptly stopped. And as he puts it, his spirit left his body.
It had never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. But on that one occasion, when my heart stopped, my spirit left my body. And I went to a place that I was in contact with other spiritual entities. And they had a luminous effect to them. And what they were communicating to me was unconditional love.
Did you recognize any of these, like, spirits or shapes or beings?
No, I didn't recognize them. I only recognized their love for me.
Suddenly, Bill awoke to find his shirt had been ripped open and his chest covered in red marks.
The smiling nurse that he was talking to before was now visibly disheveled after having worked a whole 6 minutes to bring Bill back to life.
Bill recalled his spiritual journey to the nurse and begged her to let him go back to that realm of love.
Severe damage was done to the heart because of lack of blood going to the muscle. It dies.
He now had about half of the ejection fraction of a healthy adult, which is the strength of the heartbeat. The extensive damage limited his abilities to do activities.
The heart attack he experienced is known as the widowmaker, which relates to the left anterior descending artery. His artery was 90% occluded or blocked, and he was non-symptomatic.
And my entire life since then has been according to a plan.
Bill was placed on the transplant list, and his cardiologist was meeting with him weekly as his health continued to decline.
And they had determined that my electrical system had also been damaged during this heart attack.
The damage was so severe, he had a defibrillator implanted in his chest.
The defibrillator, when it fires, it can only be related to sticking your finger into a light socket being hit by a horse kicked by a horse at the same time.
He was admitted to intensive care, and his ejection fraction continued dropping weekly. Doctors told him to prepare for the worst.
He said, "Bill, you know, I really like you, and we had discussed your case today, and if I were you, I would be prepared for the worst." So I went home and I gave away the most precious objects to people I loved, arranged for and paid for my funeral.
I can't imagine what that must be like to know and anticipate your own death.
I respected this person's opinion, so I was transitioning without a lot of anxiety.
His sister is a medical professional in Canada and told him he had other options. She proceeded to seek out second opinions in Florida.
But it's progressively getting worse. The EF fraction had dropped below 10, and that is very weak. I can only walk maybe 10 steps without holding onto the wall.
Tampa General Hospital eventually called Bill to go over the details of his transplant, knowing he qualified at all the facilities in Florida. After that conversation, he knew that Tampa General was where he wanted to be.
I was too sick to drive. My son, who lives in the Keys, came to Jupiter and drove me across the state for heart transplant evaluation.
The evaluation is an all-day process with exams, testing, image taking, EKGs, and interviews. At the end of the day, Bill asked if he could go home, but was told he had 48 hours to live without a transplant.
Strangely, there was a peace that came over me. And recognizing that I had a relationship with the Lord, and He offered me His grace and peace at that time.
While at Tampa General waiting for the transplant, his defibrillator fired 7 times in one day.
To the point that the one nurse said, "You were this far out of the bed with that last hit."
He spent the next few weeks in the critical care unit, followed by a 10-month stay in a step-down unit, which is a telemetry cardiac ward at Tampa General.
And so what was your reaction to the news that we've got a heart for you?
10 months later, so much happened in those 10 months. I was sad to begin with because I knew someone had died that I would live. And I thought about his family and how they were feeling. And then I thought, well, there's a reason for this. And you know, I'm sure that there's a plan here that I'm going to do the best I can, recognizing I was living for 2 people now.
While in the step-down unit, Bill met a nurse named Debbie and began to develop a relationship with her. Debbie's connection with Bill was profound.
And nurses many times do get attached to their patients. Most of the time I would say they do get attached, especially the ones that stay, because you become part of their everyday family. You're taking care of them day in and day out. In Bill's case, he was from Jupiter, Florida, which is a distance away.
Debbie would often decorate Bill's room for the holidays during his 10 months in the ward.
But in the case of anybody waiting for a transplant, you don't know when that's going to be. Whatever we could do to make his time on a positive note, to make his wait less stressful, to bring happiness, to show love, that's what all nurses do.
Bill eventually proposed to her in the garden at Tampa General a few months after his transplant.
And when Bill and I started falling in love and he asked me to marry him, we both just looked at each other and thought, wow, if we could have even 2 years together, we would feel very blessed. And we are approaching 20 years, so it's very magnificent. We're very blessed. We just would never have dreamed this.
In 1975, a urologist diagnosed her with polycystic kidney disease, the same disease that had killed her father 5 years earlier.
My father had died just 5 years earlier. We were told it was from a stroke, but I found out through an autopsy report that it was polycystic kidneys, which is the disease I have. So they told me then in my 40s or 50s my kidneys would fail and I would have to have dialysis or a possible transplant.
In 2009, Debbie's kidneys started to decline and she began dialysis treatments.
I figured I would go on dialysis. That's what the doctor had told me when I was 20 years old. Figured that I would do the best I could. I would be on dialysis until I could get a transplant through the list. My friend and co-worker, Pam, who I worked with for over 20 years, insisted she would not take no for an answer, and she insisted that she'd get tested because she knew that she was going to be my organ donor.
In 2010, she received her friend's kidney. Both are doing well today.
Be a hero, share your life, save someone's life, you know, be an organ donor. Be a living organ donor if you can. If not, make sure you're an organ donor after you leave this world.
He's played guitar for years, but after the transplant, Bill discovered he was able to play the piano.
And I was playing in a church band, and the person that played piano there for years, she left, and I just sat at the piano, and I could play it. I thought, well, how's this possible?
For the last 15 years, Bill has played a portable piano for patients in the critical care unit at TGH to bring comfort to patients, their families, and staff.
Tampa General studies show 76% of patients in high-stress environments like the cardiac unit receive benefits such as lower anxiety from listening to music.
I've been doing it for 15 years, 3 days a week now, Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And the patients with palliative care, they text me if they have a patient that's actively passing, and they'll ask me to go play for them to help in the transition process.
By choosing to be an organ donor, Bill says you can save dozens of people. He believes it's important to share the decision with your family that you wish to be a donor, as they will have a final say.
The generosity of that person is the reason I'm here, able to speak to you today.
Absolutely.
And his love for his fellow man.
Okay.
That and by the grace of God. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.